Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing China's Belt and Road Initiative and how the project is benefiting both Russia and China. Back to our panel straight away. Song, before the break, we're seeing how Russia-China grouping up on this is actually changing in a way geopolitically. The Americans have sort of stepped back, been slightly suspicious, but we have a new administration. Donald Trump, the president, very much interested in infrastructure. Could you see a way where this US administration tries to belatedly sort of get involved in the One Belt, One Road policy?
I think Mr. Trump's this infrastructure issue is basically focused on America itself, but I do believe there will be chances for this America, China, and Russia to work together in this region. And previously, as you mentioned, also America was having this new Silk Road initiative, but it didn't work out all right. But that reflects the Americans' concept to make the Central Asia to be a peaceful and prosperous region. Because America believes the Central Asia is having a lot of challenges, religious extremism, terrorism, and others. But they also believe that economic growth and the social development will finally help to settle down this security challenge and also to remove those kind of extremism and terrorism from the region. So I think now this OBOR initiative and EEU initiative of Russia have been working together, and I see a potential possibility for America's participation in this Central Asia and Euro-Asia cooperation program. And especially Mr. Trump has been having different attitude toward Russia and Mr. Putin than Mr. Obama. Mr. Obama was very much kind of opposed to Mr. Putin, but Mr. Trump, in spite of the opposition from the Democrats, he's still willing to work at least on some issues with Russia.
I think your point about terrorism, religious extremism in the region being combated by economic growth is well taken, because the major powers, US, obviously China and Russia, have a real mutual interest in that. Going back to Beijing, Chen Chenchen, there has been some criticism, though, that Russia is very much the junior partner in this, and that even though it has vast energy resources, which of course China is happy to get, it's really other areas of Russian industry that need stimulating. How can the One Belt, One Road do this, especially finding Eastern markets for Russian goods that perhaps are more difficult because of sanctions and other access problems in the West?
I think the potential for bilateral cooperation is still very huge. Of course, there are some critics trying to hype up the sort of competition between these two countries. But so far, if you look at the agricultural products cooperation, if you look at the energy cooperation, there are very strong will on both sides. For example, if you look at the food security issue in China, China is trying its best to diversify agricultural import resources. And Russia is a very ideal partner. And Russia itself is also trying to find the best way to expand its export of food. So in the future, there will also be a new food corridor on the land link China with Russia all the way. And of course, in the energy cooperation, the same mentality applies too. For China, I'm pretty much sure you have heard of the dilemma of Malacca Strait, because for now the energy transmission route is mainly for China is mainly passing through this Malacca
yes, most
Strait.
of the oil comes through the South China Sea, yes.
Yes, of course. So China itself also wants to diversify the energy routes. And honestly, it's not exaggerating at all that the pipeline now links China and Russia is the safest among all the energy import routes for China, because all other routes surpasses areas with huge political turmoil or political uncertainty. So there are a strong will from both sides to cooperate with each other.
Yeah, Maxim, Chen Chen's point, especially about food security, is important because we've seen a huge uptick of Russian wheat, for example, being exported to China. Where else would Russia like to see some gains? Obviously, energy, food, but also as it tries to diversify its economy, there's a huge market of 1.4 billion people right there on its doorstep in the east.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with depreciation of ruble, China is becoming a market for Russia. And so when we speak about One Belt, One Road, it's not just a way from the east to the west, but for Russia, it's from the west to the east. And another interesting opportunity is a tourist market. Russia is a tourist destination, because for Chinese, Russia is a Europe, but it's affordable Europe. And Chinese are flocking in numbers to Russia as a tourist. And we can develop tourist clusters, especially in Siberia, around like Baikal Lake or in Altai Mountains. And these transportation links that One Belt, One Road is promoting will help Chinese tourists come to Russia and to contribute to the development of Russian economy as well. So we are looking forward to the influx of Chinese tourists into Russia. That's probably an opportunity that not so many people are speaking about now, but there is a huge potential profit for Russian economy from this point of view.
Well, we're talking about it, so hopefully the world takes notice. Anton, in terms of geostrategy, how does this One Belt, One Road initiative help the overall Russian-Chinese relationship? Obviously, they cooperate on many levels. As we said before, there has been some criticism that China is the stronger partner, Russia isn't. The US may try a charm offensive towards Moscow at some point. Does this help cement relations?
It does. Let me go back to my earlier point about the tone. What a difference there is between the way that the Chinese speak and conduct their dialogue with the Russians and the way that the West, the United States and the EU did during the Ukraine crisis. I don't think that anyone who is serious in Russia, and that includes the Russian president, doesn't understand that the Russians are economically, demographically, even geopolitically to a certain extent, either equal to the Chinese or weaker, certainly economically and demographically. But what makes a world of a difference is that Beijing does not speak down to Moscow and it doesn't condescend. This, by the way, is a very interesting reversal of how the Chinese felt about the Soviet Union, that they were being treated as a junior partner on a fairly regular basis after the 1950s. Now, the advantages for Russia are, of course, also, in addition to being economic, also geopolitical. And what's interesting to me is that we saw one very important change of leadership in Central Asia in the past couple of years with the death of Karimov and the change of leadership in Uzbekistan. It looked like there was no competition between the Chinese and the Russians that broke out into the open about who would be the successor. And the United States and Europe were essentially locked out very quietly from this struggle. The next big question will be Kazakhstan, whose leader Nazarbayev is also becoming older. But there's an example of the two Eurasian superpowers cooperating and handling affairs very carefully and allowing countries to go through peaceful regime changes in places where democracy was not really a very strong suit. I predict that this will continue.
Could there be spillover, last word, Song, spillover effects on the One Belt, One Road when it comes to instability in the area? One thinks of Afghanistan as well. Do you see possibilities way forward there, which has been an intractable conflict, as you know, for the Americans, its longest war in history?
You mean the potential cooperation between...
exactly. Russia and China.
Russia and China. I think China has been helping in Afghanistan in the last few years, especially in terms of investment and economic growth. And Russia has been trying to have their own existence over there. But at the same time, we need to see America has had a very, very serious suspicion upon Russia, and they wanted to see no existence of Russians' influence over there. I think the new Trump administration may have a different approach. In that regard, I think the three countries will have more cooperations to help achieve stability and economic growth in Afghanistan.
It'll be really interesting if the US, Russia, and China could avoid the triangulation of the past. Fascinating discussion. We're going to be covering, obviously, the summit here on CGTN as it happens. I hope to have you all back again. Thank you so much to all our panel, both here in the studio and in Moscow and Beijing. That's all we have time for.